everybody, what is up? This is Kenneth, the K-Rock Cline, for episode 20 of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping. Yes, I am back, and folks, in case you're wondering what's with all the commotion and the noise outside, well, I'll be real honest here. I've been needing to take a walk to get myself at least in some good shape and all that, so I usually like to go on my walks along with doing the elliptical and such, but I also realized that I need to start thinking about my podcast here. So I'm sitting there thinking, what can I do? Can I do a podcast or should I just go on my walk? And then I thought, hey, why not try to do a little both? So as of right now, folks, I am officially on my walk, but I figured we might as well make this podcast real interesting. We are going to be talking about some things as I go on my walk, which might take about, say about an hour or so, depending on how I feel for this kind of walking for today. But we're going to be talking about my thoughts on a few NBA acquisitions, whether it's through the draft or free agency, which has already begun. Some interesting concepts as far as what I think should happen or what I think will happen with all these transactions that have taken place. And also, considering that we are nearing the approaching spot of July 4th, I figured I'd tell you about the craziest baseball game that has ever taken place on July 4th. Now, some people might know which one I'm talking about, but I figured, you know what? We might as well just go ahead and just talk about it for those of you that don't really know. This is one of the wildest, craziest games I've ever heard that happened on July 4th, and I'm going to be talking about it as of right now. So, folks, bear with me as I start my walking here, going along Northwest Parkway, and I'm just going to be walking along. If you hear some cars go by, don't worry. That's just all part of this podcast. Just trying to do something a little creative here for this 20th edition of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock. And, folks, we're going to cut right here. When we come back, I'm going to give my thoughts on these recent NBA acquisitions. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. All right, folks, we are just about set to begin my first segment here as I am currently still walking on Northwest Parkway here in Beaumont, Texas, looking around to see a nice little field of some cows grazing on the grass here. Now, folks, it is about 8:23 my time as of right now, and it is kind of a warm 90 degrees or so, so heat advisory in effect, but hopefully I can manage to get through this podcast without any trouble whatsoever. But anyways, folks, I wanted to talk about recent NBA things that have happened in the NBA. So first off, I want to start with the draft. Now, I had an interest in this draft because my Houston Rockets had the third pick in this year's NBA draft. And, you know, it's funny. The Rockets seem to be lucking themselves into having a top 4 pick over the past few seasons. I mean, last year they were able to draft they had 2 picks. The first pick they were able to get Amen Thompson with the 4th pick whatsoever. And then later, with the 20th pick, they were fortunate enough to get Cam Whitmore, who somehow slid all the way down to the bottom of that draft pick because of some injury-related concerns. But then, you go back to 2 years ago, the Rockets were able to draft Jabari Smith with the 3rd pick, and most people thought he was going to be the number 1 pick whatsoever. And I'm sorry, folks. I'm currently passing on one of the cows, and they're actually having a discussion with some of these swans or birds or geese, for that matter. I'm not sure what they are from this distance, but now the geese are flying away. I guess they didn't want me to mention them in this podcast. But yeah, going back to what I was talking about, the Rockets drafted Jabari Smith, number 3, when he could have been the number 1 pick drafted by the Orlando Magic, but that didn't work out. And then you go back to the few years after when they drafted Jalen Green, number 2 overall, and then they were able to get a steal with Alperen Sengun. So the Rockets have have a young team. They are up and coming, and this was a team that was vying in contention for a play-in spot. Unfortunately, they missed out by 4 games to the Golden State Warriors. They finished with a 500 record. So Ime Udoka, the head coach for the Rockets, has the team in the right direction. And there was a lot of talk about what was he going to do with this draft pick, considering that the Rockets have this young, talented squad. And ultimately, the Rockets decided to go with the name that a lot of people seem to be matching him up with, and that was Reed Sheppard from the University of Kentucky. And you might look at Reed Sheppard and you might say, oh, great, a white boy who can shoot three-pointers and all that. Yeah, he's a great three-point shooter, best three-point shooter in the NBA draft, a white guy, and obviously, but you're going to need more than that. What else does he bring to the table aside from that? And why would the Rockets want to draft him? Well, looking at the Rockets stats from last year, from behind the three-point line, they were shooting a abysmal 35.2% from downtown, which of the 30 NBA teams, that put him down to 23rd. And typically, I know that three-pointers get overused a lot, considering that the NBA has been overusing the three-point line nowadays, going back to the days of the Warriors when their dynasty run had started. But the fact is, you still need some three-point shooting, and the Rockets don't have that three-point shooting situation. And they needed a guy that could be able to knock down some big-time shots. Because Jabari Smith, he's not a three-point shooter, even though he's made some. Alperen Sengun, he's not a three-point shooter, even though he's made some. Jalen Green, he's more of a attack-the-basket guy in the driving force. Same thing with Amen Thompson, and same thing with Cam Whitmore. So clearly, the Rockets needed a three-point guy. And what they got is a guy who, believe it or not, made 52% from downtown in his college career. I mean, we're talking about a guy that makes 9 out of every 17 three-point attempts. That is more than 50%, folks. And I tell you what, I really like this pick. Now, I didn't think the Rockets needed to get a guy that was a flashy superstar, because when you think about it, this NBA draft, I mean, really there was only one big name that was on everyone's minds, and I'll get to him in just a moment. But this was really not a loaded, stacked-up draft of talented prospects like last year, with the big name being Victor Wembanyama for the San Antonio Spurs. And I'll talk about him more in just a moment. But this wasn't really a big-name draft class, if you will. And the Rockets, in my opinion, got the guy that they really needed. Someone who can shoot the three-pointers, but more importantly, someone who can actually pass them the ball. Now, Houston already has a playmaker, a guy that can dish out the rock in Fred VanVleet, but he is obviously approaching the start of the decline of his career, and the Rockets don't necessarily have him for long on their contract, so they needed somebody to sort of be a predecessor, and that's why Reed Sheppard, to me, fits that role, because this guy can dish out the rock, he can play some great defense, he could do all that, and I think Houston is in really good shape, because they really needed somebody else. Right now, what the Rockets have are, I want to say, 7 players, and it's funny, I joked about this, but they almost kind of, everybody was bragging about the young core that the Rockets have, and I mentioned that with the addition of Reed Sheppard, they reminded me of the Mercury 7 from the movie The Right Stuff. You know, when the astronauts were in the process of trying to get themselves up to space so that can get themselves one step closer of reaching the ultimate goal of beating the Soviet Union to the moon. And this is kind of the way I look at it. The Rockets are the new Mercury 7, or maybe if you pick another planet aside from Mercury, that might make more of a difference. But I've joked about this because the Rockets obviously have a very young core. There was some talks about Houston possibly trading for a superstar, because the day before the draft, they made an interesting trade with the Brooklyn Nets, and also got themselves with the Phoenix Suns. And there was like a lot of picks that the Rockets got, as well as they gave some of their picks back to Brooklyn, which I thought was really interesting, because normally if I were a GM and someone were to give me their picks, I'd take it and say, I'm not giving them back because you gave it to me. But I think the Rockets were doing that, and that got a lot of people really interested, and it had a lot of people wondering what exactly were the Rockets doing. And one of the things that came up was the Rockets possibly being in line to trade up for Kevin Durant. And I said to myself, there's no way that the Rockets would trade up for Kevin Durant, because Kevin Durant has never been the same player that he was after he left Golden State. He played with the Brooklyn Nets. He was the leader. He has one great season with them and came within a Ronald McDonald foot away from winning the series against the eventual champion Milwaukee Bucks. But he hadn't done that much. He then goes to Phoenix, and the last few years with the Suns have been disasters. He can't get by the Dallas Mavericks and couldn't get past the Denver Nuggets. So clearly Durant is now thinking of, there's talk about Kevin Durant possibly, leaving the Phoenix Suns. And the Rockets were linked up with that. So most people were thinking that, well, it's possible that the Rockets could trade up for Kevin Durant, which is why they got all these picks in return. And I'm just thinking, there's just no way you would want to do that. Well, as it turns out, the Rockets were not going to be trading for Kevin Durant. And the reason why I think the Rockets got all the picks that they acquired from the Nets and Suns is that they are preparing for a possibility that not every one of the players that they have, the young core, might be able to develop and might be able to make themselves contributors to a team that ultimately, hopefully, can win a championship within the next few seasons. So the Rockets obviously are trying to stockpile the draft picks to use for later if they wanted to add maybe a superstar player in the future. Right now, that doesn't appear to be the case for this season. Although, there was another Suns player that was linked up with the Rockets as far as a potential trade, and that was Devin Booker, which I think would have made more sense considering that he's a very talented scorer and everything. But unfortunately, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense when you think back on it, because Houston's already have a bunch of young guys. And where is that going to develop into a leadership role? They have young guys. They have veteran players, guys that are willing to help contribute. And this is a Rockets team that would have maybe taken the next step to making the playoffs if they added Booker. But where was he going to fit with the role? So ultimately, that has not transpired at this point. Still may be a possibility, but I think Devin Booker might be on the way out to somewhere else. So in my opinion, I think the Rockets did the right thing, drafting Reed Shepherd with the number 3 pick, and then adding all the players, the draft picks, to stockpile them for future trades and for future years for the time being. And I think this would probably help Houston get over the hump and at least make the play-in tournament and go from there. Now, the big name in this year's NBA draft was Bronny James, who, as we all know, is the son of Los Angeles Lakers great forward LeBron James. And there was a lot of people that were curious to know where he was going to go. And most people kind of already had this predicted, that it was likely to happen, that LeBron James was going to want the Lakers to draft Bronny James to have an opportunity to be the first father-son duo to be on the same team. That's why Ken Griffey Sr. and Ken Griffey Jr. appearing together as a father-son duo when the Seattle Mariners were able to acquire Sr. and then draft Ken Griffey Jr. So we're talking about the first ever father-son duo in the NBA. Now, I think the Lakers did the right thing in drafting Bronny James, but doing it so in the second round, because most people believed that, not most people, but some people out there believed that Bronny James was worth a first-round pick, that he was going to be drafted into the first round. And I thought that would be very stupid. because the guy played averaged almost 5 points per game in his one freshman season on a very bad USC team, mind you. And you're asking the guy to be the number one pick, let alone be a first-round pick for the Lakers? I don't think so. I think the Lakers made the right decision to move him to the second round. They did draft Dalton Connect, who is absolutely a fantastic, phenomenal athlete and might be a big contributor to the Lakers for this time. But all of this feels scripted. And I know Mark T. Robinson, my co-host on my other podcast, Two Pals on a Pod, which you can listen to on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Buzzsprout when you get a chance. But my colleague, Mark T. Robinson, posted on his YouTube channel, Mark's Remarks, and he basically said that this was scripted. And I can't help but agree, because I don't think anybody should be surprised that Bronny James was going to the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, there is one thing that I would have liked to have seen happen. There were some talks that maybe the Boston Celtics, who won a championship, who actually had the pick right before the Lakers, would take him. And I thought to myself, if I were the NBA, if I were general manager of the franchise right in front of me, I would have actually drafted Bronny James, but then call up the Lakers and say, look, you want Bronny? Give me a lot of picks. You think of him as an outstanding, talented player. You give me at least one first and one second, or maybe two of each, or one, and I'll give you Bronny James. I would have held him for ransom, and then as soon as I get what I want, I trade Bronny back to the Lakers. That way, I not only get my players or get the picks I want, but I screw the Lakers out of handing me theirs. And the Lakers, things have not been really good for them as of late, because clearly they have some issues. Not only are they dealing with a new rookie head coach, J.J. Redick, who I don't know if it's going to be a good fit for the Lakers in the long run because of the fact that he has no coaching experience. But it is a very interesting dilemma that the Lakers got themselves in with hiring him to be their new head coach. But also, you have LeBron James, who some people believe is actually running this show down in L.A., running the circus for that matter. And I can't say I help but agree with that, because I think ever since LeBron James came to L.A., he's wanted to put his stamp and put his mark on trying to, remind everyone to show that he can do some things better than what Michael Jordan can. And that's being an older, and maybe if he were to have the opportunity to be the next head coach of a future franchise. But I just struggle with that idea, and I struggle with that mindset that LeBron James will be a success in that area. Because now you're drafting Bronny James, who not only has averaged 4.8 points in his 1 year of college basketball, but he also did have some problems with some heart trouble during that season. And I don't know if that was part of the reason why Bronny James, did not perform up to par. Maybe that was a big factor, but there's a little bit of distrust with that. Now, some people might say, well, geez, K-Rock, you remember Pistol Pete Maravich? He played all those times in college and in the NBA without one side of his heart. Yes, I understand that. And I think Bronny James will definitely have to figure out a way to get himself to continue to play at a level that he would certainly like to be. But I just think it's going to be an interesting take for the Los Angeles Lakers in how are they going to develop him. Because right now, I feel like this is becoming more of a distraction. LeBron James playing with his son. Yes, it's a historic moment. Father-son. Happy Father's Day, Dad. We might be playing the NBA Finals. Maybe not, because I don't know if the Lakers are good enough to win a championship before LeBron James does, in fact, retire. But I just think it's more of a distraction because Bronny James is now going to be thrust into a situation where he's going to be going up against some athletic players, some of them who were drafted that are probably better than him, and he's going to be thrown into the fire against these great teams in the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference, he's going to have a lot of attention on him. And that's probably going to be, like, if he doesn't perform, it is going to be his fault because he didn't live up to expectations, but it's more so going to be on LeBron James's fault because LeBron James really was the one that wanted him in the NBA in the first place. But we'll just have to wait and see. I just think that the Lakers did right by drafting Bronny James, but I feel like they're setting themselves up for more trouble in that franchise organization for the time being. And finally, my last NBA topic I want to talk about, free agency actually started today, and there are some talks that Paul George is potentially leaving to go join the Philadelphia 76ers, which I think would be very interesting, although I'm not sure how much that makes the 76ers because they haven't really been able to crack the NBA Finals because you still got to play Boston, you still got to play Miami, although that franchise might not be around for a while, and then you still have to go play other teams like the New York Knicks. They have a bright future ahead of them, and then they also have to deal with the Indiana Pacers, just another team I can think of off the top of my head. But Paul George might be going to the Philadelphia 76ers as of this podcast. However, there was another acquisition that was made which has really confirmed about the legacy of this player. And that is that Chris Paul has signed a 1-year, $11 million contract to join Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs. Now, I think it's real interesting because Chris Paul, to me, was one of the guys that I rooted for to win a championship. He had some great opportunities to do so. He could have won a champ. He was expected to be the star player for the Hornets, but that didn't quite work out. He was expected to get traded to the Lakers and was almost traded to the Lakers, but Commissioner Stern axed a deal in that moment, saying it would be unfair for that to happen. Well, guess what? There were superstars going to other teams to join other superstars, and that became unfair, David Stern. Rest in peace, by the way. But Chris Paul couldn't win in New Orleans. He then goes to the Los Angeles Clippers, where he teams up with Blake Griffin, and they couldn't even get to the Western Conference Finals, so that didn't work out. Then he joins James Harden and the Houston Rockets. He joins James Harden and the Houston Rockets, and if it weren't for Chris Paul's injury, I think that the Rockets go to the finals. They beat the Warriors, and then they beat the LeBron James and the Cavaliers, and they win the championship. That was probably Chris Paul's second best chance, because after his stint with Houston didn't go well, he goes to Oklahoma City after he gets dealt to the Thunder in return for Russell Westbrook. And then he joins the Phoenix Suns, who already have a talented superstar in Devin Booker, gets them to the finals. They take a 2-0 series lead, and they wet the bed, and things went downhill from there. So, is it safe to say that by Chris Paul joining the San Antonio Spurs with a very talented rookie in Victor Wembanyama, even if it's for 1 year, is it safe to say that his career, his opportunity of winning a championship is over? Well, I really hate to say this, but I think it is. Because Chris Paul has had multiple opportunities to win a championship, and he had his shot, but hasn't been able to come through. And I'm just having a hard time seeing the San Antonio Spurs be a threat in the Western Conference. Now, do I think the Spurs will be a better team? Absolutely. Do I see them making a play-in tournament this season with Chris Paul and Victor? Yes. I think the Spurs will be, at best, the top seed of the 4 play-in teams. Number 7 or number 8, depending on how they finish in this stacked-up Western Conference. But I'm having a hard time seeing, the Spurs getting as far to the NBA Finals. But I do think Chris Paul brings a lot of veteran experience. He can be the point guard. He can help Victor Wembanyama develop into the outstanding force that everyone is expecting him to be. And Wembanyama, he deserved to win Rookie of the Year, even if at times it wasn't working out for him. But he was deserving of it. He can help Wemby develop into that outstanding player and, just provide a little bit of toughness, because Victor Wembanyama is going to have to bulk his way up if he wants to be the best center in the NBA as of right now, because the eyes of the world are on this man who was the number one draft pick. People are saying, oh, he's going to be a generational talent. And look, I'm not saying he won't be, but I think we need to be a little patient and wait and see if Victor Wembanyama can develop into the player that fans want him to be. So I look at the Spurs, what they're doing, and I think this is just a way to get Victor to continue to develop in this game and also get the Spurs in position to make the playoffs. But I just think for the legacy of Chris Paul, it's all but locked that he will not win a championship. And that's sad, because Chris Paul is one of the guys that I really have great respect for. You know, in high school, he scored 61 points about a day or so after his grandpa passed. And the reason why he scored 61 points was because that was how old his grandpa was when he passed away. So a remarkable performance on the part of CP3. But it is sad that a player like him has so much talent, so much ability to play with some great players, and he just was never able to get over that hump and to win a championship. Now, look, he's still got one more year, maybe two, but I'm just having a hard time seeing it with the Spurs for at least the time being. But you know what? Chris Paul is a Hall of Famer, and even if he doesn't win a championship, he should be remembered as one of the best players to play the game. So I do support Chris in the decision, and I think this will definitely be a huge boost to the Spurs. Maybe not to make a Western Conference Finals run, but certainly improving themselves as far as the talent level is concerned. So, and then one more player I forgot to mention, Klay Thompson for the Golden State Warriors, not going to be around Golden State anymore. It is possible that, Thompson's going to be looking to go elsewhere. Some people have already said he could join the Lakers, he could join the Clippers, and he can join the Dallas Mavericks. If you were to ask me which of the three teams do I think he deserves most to go to, as much as I hate to say this, but Dallas is the best fit for him. You got Luka Doncic, an all-talented scorer, and you got Kyrie Irving, who's a ball distributor and can score. What Dallas really needed was somebody to take the load off and shoot from the three-point range this season. Or last season for that matter. The Mavericks could have maybe used some of that to win the NBA Finals. Instead, they get beat badly by Boston. And unfortunately, I think for the Lakers and the Clippers, it is enticing, and Thompson might make the team better. But I think if he really wants to continue to add on to his legacy and not just be remembered as Steph Curry's sidekick, well, he probably should go to Dallas. And even if it means being Luka's sidekick, being Kyrie's sidekick, or just being one of the three, you know what? He'll have one more championship than Steph Curry if the Mavericks do, in fact, win the championship for next season. So definitely got to keep an eye on that as the Warriors are looking to find the right option to keep Steph Curry out. And folks, that is going to wrap it up here for my thoughts on the NBA as I continue to walk here. I am currently walking past this apartment complex. But stay tuned, folks. We're going to step aside, but when I come back, I'm going to tell you the wild and wacky story about the craziest baseball game in the history of a July 4th. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. Did you guys ever watch the movie The Sandlot? Do you remember that scene when all the boys are on the field, they're playing baseball on the 4th of July, and when Benny the Jet Rodriguez hits a crushing shot, the boys are distracted by the sights of the fireworks popping into the night sky, all amazed and impressed. They're hypnotized by it. Yeah, that's definitely one of my most favorite scenes in that movie. And especially with the playing of Ray Charles' America the Beautiful. Oh, beautiful. Well, I don't want to get in trouble by imitating Ray Charles. I like Ray Charles. Rest in peace to him. But, yeah, so we are approaching the 4th of July. And even though this podcast is coming out a few days before, I figured I might as well tell you guys a little funny July 4th story. A wild and crazy July 4th story that involves a baseball game that took place back in 1985. And if you were in the city of Atlanta, you probably know which one I'm talking about. But this was the wildest baseball game that that anyone has ever told about. So, July 4th, 1985, the Atlanta Braves are taking on their divisional rival, New York Mets, or one of their rivals, the New York Mets. Now, this was the year before the Mets would go on to have that great season and win the World Series. But in 85, the Mets were still building their team. So, the game was supposed to start at 7:05. However, because of a rain delay, it didn't start until 9 o'clock. And both teams started off, they scored a run in the first inning. Then the score was tied at 1. Then, right as the third inning was about to go, another rain delay comes, and the game was delayed for 41 minutes. Play resumes, and the Braves take a 3-1 lead after 3 innings. Well, the Mets score 4 runs in the top of the 4th to take a 5-3 lead. The Braves cut that down to 5-4 after the 5th inning. The Mets score 1 run back in the top of the 6th inning to make it 6-4. And you might be hearing some fire truck sirens, ambulance sirens. There was a couple of ambulance and fire trucks that came by as soon as I was getting ready to start this podcast. But anyway, the Mets scored in the 6th inning to lead 6-4. In the top of the 8th inning, they tack on another run and now lead 7-4. The Braves cut that down to 7-5 in the bottom of the 8th with the bases loaded, and then Dale Murphy clears the bases. 7-5 turns into an 8-7 lead for the Braves, and they are now 3 outs away from winning the game. They bring in arguably the best closer at the time, Bruce Sutter, to try to close the door on the victory. But the Mets tie up the ball game in the top of the 9th, and folks, we got extra innings of baseball. It stays tied from the 10th to the 12th innings on until the top of the 13th. Howard Johnson hits a 2-run shot, puts the Mets up 10-8. But in the bottom of the 13th, the Braves tie up the ball game when they too would hit a home run off the bat of Terry Harper. So now the game progresses. It's still tied at 10 for the next 4 innings. The 17th inning is memorable because Davey Johnson, the manager of the Mets, and Darryl Strawberry, who is the team's best hitter, the Mets' best hitter, they both get ejected from the game. And so now they're out because they were arguing on balls and strikes, and we go to the top of the 18th inning. Lenny Dykstra hits a sacrifice fly to put the Mets up by 1 run at 11-10, and the Braves are 3 outs away from losing the ball game. So the Braves, they record the first 2 outs, or they get 2 outs, the Mets do, and step into the plate for the Braves, a pinch hitter by the name of Rick Camp. And Rick Camp is not a name that one talks about when it comes to power, strength. No, he's just a regular pitcher because the Braves are running out of fielders here. So they use Rick Camp to come into the game as a pinch hitter. This was back before we had the DH rules, and this was also where we didn't have any of the extra men on second base to start extra innings, as well as a pitch clock situation. No, this is just normal baseball back in those days. So, Rick Camp steps to the batter's box. Gary Carter, the catcher for the Mets, sees who it is, tells all his outfielders, calls them in. Come on in, guys. Easy out. We got this. Get this out. We go home happy. The pitcher was Tom Gorman for the Mets. He throws 2 strikes to Rick Camp. One strike away, the Mets are going to win and take another victory, and Braves fans will finally have their fireworks post-game show to watch. Gorman throws a pitch much like that. Rick Camp swings, and he ties the ball game with a home run. Oh my goodness gracious. Rick Camp, a relief pitcher, with his first career home run. The Braves fans who were still in attendance go crazy. The Mets are shocked. They can't believe that this happened. Everybody is just so emotional about this right now. Even the motorcycle guys that just drove by me are shocked about this as well. But yeah, Rick Camp ties the ball game at 11, and we go to the 19th inning. The Mets score 5 runs in the top of the 19th. They bring in Ron Darling, who was the 7th pitcher used in the ball game for the Mets, to try to close the door on the win. But the Braves don't go away quietly. They score 2 runs and have 2 men on base, with the tying run coming to the plate. And that person coming up is our boy, Rick Camp. Oh, man, Rick Camp. The guy who tied the game in the bottom of the 18th with his first career homer is up to bat again. Can he do it again? Can lightning strike twice? He gets to 2 strikes. The pitcher throws the ball. Camp swings and strikes out swinging. Just like that, the Mets win the game. Final score, 16-13. And the Braves fans finally got their long-awaited post-game show, which didn't start until about 4 a.m. Man, I've just been thinking about that for a little bit. Can you imagine going to a baseball game that goes 19 innings just to see a 4th of July fireworks show, and you have to wait until the next morning, July 5th, to finally see the fireworks? Would you still be there when they finally happen? How about if you were living there at the time? You just went to another fireworks show in downtown Atlanta earlier. You enjoy the hot dogs and the beer. You talk to people. You sit down on picnic baskets or picnic blankets. Not picnic baskets. That would be very uncomfortable. But you sit down on the picnic blankets and you watch the fireworks go on. You finally go home. You get some sleep, ready for July the 5th. And then at 4 a.m. on July 5th, you hear more fireworks going off. And you're wondering, what in the world is going on? It's still early in the morning. And then you find out what happened, and it's like, oh, okay, I see. Yeah, that would be a pretty weird experience if that were to happen to me. I would have rather leave. Like, I would have left the ball game earlier. And I would have actually left and not care much, because I really wanted to see the fireworks, but I don't know if I would have stayed 19 innings or so to see it finally happen. So, yeah, that's what I would have done in that situation. You know, it kind of reminds me of a story that happened to me. Well, not happened to me, but it reminds me of another baseball game I went to. I want to say it was around 2007 or 2008, maybe. But it was a 4th of July game, and I was planning on, seeing the fireworks show at the Astros game. And the game went 13 innings. It ended after midnight. Hunter Picks walks it off with a home run. Astros won the ball game. I forget who we were playing, but we ended up watching the fireworks display, me and my folks. And it was after midnight when we finally, got to see the fireworks. So kind of a crazy, bizarre circumstance, to say the least. So, folks, I just made it back to my apartment complex right now. About to get freshened up here. When I come back, I'll have my final thoughts on the show. Talk about everything from the NBA actions, transactions, and go from there. So, stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. we are back in my place, and I am just cooling off right now after the walk I just had. And part of the reason is I'm just trying to refresh myself and just take it easy. But also, folks, my AC is not working on in here. It's burning up, and I'm just so annoyed by that. But hopefully I get that taken care of. Hey, listen, I know this was a weird podcast because I was trying to see if I could do a podcast while walk at the same time, and I think I could, but maybe for future references or future points, I'm probably going to need to stick to doing it in one normal setting. So that way you won't have to hear the distractions of the cars and possibly noisy people that, come into business. But yeah, so I would personally, not recommend it unless you can handle it really well, but at the same time, just be careful where you're walking and doing all of that stuff. Just stay safe and, don't be an idiot for that matter. But that's going to wrap things up for my podcast. For this edition, the 20th episode of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping. Folks, you can listen to it on Spotify and Podbean. And also, I'm going to be uploading this on my YouTube channel at KWC Line 91. That's right, KW Cline 91. And folks, that is going to wrap things up for this edition. Thank you very much for listening in, and I will see you guys next time on another episode of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock.